One night, the man who gave Kiss its soul walked out. No press conference, no warning, just silence. When Ace Frehley quit Kiss, it wasn't just a guitarist leaving a band. It was the night the biggest rock empire on Earth nearly collapsed from the inside. This is how the Spaceman's final blast almost destroyed rock itself. The rise of the Spaceman. Before the fame, before the face paint, Ace Frehley was just a skinny kid from the Bronx, part street punk, part dreamer, with a secondhand Les Paul and a head full of noise. He didn't know music theory, didn't have a plan, and didn't care. All he wanted was to play louder, faster, and wilder than anyone else. In 1973, he walked into a Kiss audition wearing mismatched sneakers, carrying a guitar that looked like it had survived a bar fight. When he plugged in, everything changed. His tone was raw lightning, loud, reckless, and hypnotic. Paul Stanley later said, "The second Ace hit that first chord, I felt the room shake." At that moment, the final piece of KISS had arrived. Soon came the transformation. Gene became the demon. Paul became the Starchild. Peter was the Catman. And Ace, he became the Spaceman. But his character wasn't fiction. The silver suit, the faraway stare, the cosmic swagger, they were all him. Ace was the dreamer floating in his own orbit, lost in the music, detached from everything else. When Kiss exploded into superstardom, Ace's guitar became their secret weapon. His solos on Shock Me, Love Gun, and Rocket Ride weren't just licks, they were explosions. On stage, he turned concerts into controlled chaos, shooting smoke and fire from his Les Paul like a spaceship launching through the dark. Kids believed he was from another planet. Maybe he was. By 1978, the band's fame was so massive that each member released a solo album. Everyone expected Gene or Paul to dominate the charts. But it was Ace who shocked the world. His album went platinum, and his single New York Groove became an anthem, the street kid from the Bronx conquering the universe. But that success changed everything. Ace wasn't just the Spaceman anymore. He'd proven he could fly solo, and that scared the rest of the band. Because when a rebel realizes he doesn't need permission to shine, the empire he helped build starts to tremble. But having power doesn't always mean control. The first exit. The night Ace walked away. By 1981, Ace Frehley was living every rock star's dream. But inside, he was miserable. The fame, the endless tours, the boardroom decisions disguised as creative meetings. It all felt wrong. Kiss wasn't the same band that once bled for every stage. It had become a business, and Ace hated every second of it. Gene and Paul were obsessed with growth, bigger shows, cleaner sound, polished production. But Ace wanted to stay raw. He wanted distortion, danger, and imperfection, the stuff that made KISS feel alive. The more he pushed for it, the more he got pushed out. When the band started recording music from The Elder, the tension exploded. Kiss had gone from writing anthems like Detroit Rock City to recording orchestral concept songs about destiny and prophecy. Ace thought it was a joke. He told producers flat out, "This isn't KISS, this is Broadway with guitars." He refused to take part in what he saw as the band's identity crisis. At meetings, his voice carried less and less weight. Every decision was made without him. Paul and Gene wanted radio hits. Ace wanted chaos and crunch. Even when he tried to fight, he was outvoted 2-1. The message was clear. His opinion didn't matter anymore. It wasn't just creative frustration. Ace was physically and mentally drained. He'd survived car crashes, addiction, and nights he could barely remember. He began skipping promo events, interviews, even photo shoots. The other members were furious, but Ace didn't care. The fire that once made him unstoppable had turned into smoke. One night in 1982, after yet another argument about direction and control, Ace did the unthinkable. He packed up his guitar, walked out of the studio, and never came back. No press release, no statement, just silence. For fans, it was the end of an era. For Kiss, it was the start of a crisis. The band that had built itself on unity and spectacle had just lost its soul. The Spaceman had left orbit, but that was only the beginning. The aftershock, what almost broke Kiss. When Ace Frehley left in 1982, Kiss wasn't just losing a guitarist, it was losing its heartbeat. Ace wasn't replaceable. He was the rebel spark, the chaos that made Kiss dangerous. Without him, the band suddenly felt mechanical, a machine trying to imitate magic. Behind the scenes, panic erupted. Ace was still legally tied to the group through his contract, which meant they couldn't even replace him immediately. Lawyers got involved, management scrambled, and Gene and Paul were left trying to keep the illusion alive. But everyone could feel it. Something had broken. When Kiss hired Vinnie Vincent as their new lead guitarist, they tried to mask the absence. Vinnie wore gold Ankh Warrior makeup, stepped into the lights, and played flawlessly. But perfection wasn't what fans wanted. They wanted the danger, the swagger, the unpredictability that Ace brought. No one could fake that. The Creatures of the Night tour was supposed to mark their big comeback, but it didn't go as planned. Ticket sales were weak. Critics called it confused, and backstage, the tension grew unbearable. Without Ace, the chemistry that once glued the band together evaporated. Even Gene later admitted, "Those years felt like trying to restart a rocket with no fuel." Then came the most desperate move of all. Kiss took off the makeup. In 1983, they shocked the world by revealing their faces live on MTV. It was meant to signal rebirth, but for many fans, it felt like a funeral. The mystique that had made them larger than life was gone. Meanwhile, Ace watched from afar. He saw his old band chasing trends and losing themselves in the process. Years later, he said, "They became what I never wanted to be, predictable." Kiss kept touring, kept recording, kept surviving. But the cracks never healed. The band that once ruled the world had lost the man who made it feel real. And as the lights dimmed and the crowds thinned, one truth became clear. Without the Spaceman, Kiss might still exist, but it would never truly fly again. But years later, the galaxy would pull him back. Return and final departure. In 1996, something no one thought possible happened. The original Kiss lineup reunited. After years of bitterness, lawsuits, and distance, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Peter Criss, and Ace Frehley stood side by side again, back in full makeup and armor. The world lost its mind. The Alive Worldwide Reunion Tour became one of the most successful tours in rock history, grossing over $140 million. When Ace stepped onto that stage for the first time in 15 years, wearing the silver Spaceman suit, the roar from the crowd was deafening. For a moment, it felt like time had reversed. The four misfits from New York were back: fire, smoke, and thunder, just like the 1970s. To the audience, it was a rebirth. To Ace, it was closure. But behind the makeup, the same cracks began to show. The reunion was built on nostalgia, not trust. Paul and Gene still controlled the finances, the set lists, and the vision. Ace and Peter were paid as employees, not partners. The equality they had promised him was a mirage. He could feel history repeating itself. During the recording of Psycho Circus in 1998, things turned tense again. Ace was credited on the album cover, but many of his solos were secretly recorded by studio musicians. He later said, "I'd come in ready to play, and my parts were already done." It didn't feel like a band anymore. It felt like a business. By 2002, during the so-called farewell tour, the magic was gone. The fame, the money, the nostalgia, none of it mattered. Ace was exhausted, disillusioned, and done being a hired gun in the empire he helped build. On the final night of the tour, he looked out at the sea of faces, smiled beneath his silver mask, and quietly said goodbye. When the lights went out, Ace Frehley walked off stage for the last time. No press, no statements, just a man reclaiming his freedom. Kiss would go on to replace him again. But every fan knew, without Ace, they could keep the name, the fire, the show, but not the soul. But Ace wasn't finished yet. Life after Kiss, the Spaceman's Revenge. When Ace Frehley left Kiss for good, most people thought that was the end of him. The headlines called him a burnout, a fallen rock star lost in his own orbit. But Ace had something that couldn't be manufactured: raw authenticity. He didn't care about fame anymore. He cared about sound, freedom, and truth. In 1987, he came roaring back with Frehley's Comet, a new band that captured everything Kiss had lost: grit, humor, and human imperfection. Their debut album was loud, unfiltered, and unapologetic. The lead single Rock Soldiers hit hard, not just as a song, but as a declaration. It was Ace's way of saying, "I'm still here." The lyrics mirrored his own life, a survivor's anthem from a man who'd lived through chaos and come out stronger. Through the late 80s and early 90s, Ace hit the road again, not as a legend, but as a fighter rebuilding his name one stage at a time. He played wherever he could: small clubs, theaters, festivals. The crowds weren't massive, but they were loyal. These weren't just fans, they were believers. They came for the guitar solos, sure, but also for the man behind them: flawed, funny, and real. His autobiography, No Regrets, later revealed how deep his battles went: addiction, isolation, and regret, but also how determined he was to live life on his own terms. In his words, "I lost everything once. That's how I learned what I really needed." Albums like Anomaly, 2009, and Space Invader, 2014, proved his fire never went out. Each release carried the same cosmic swagger that made him famous, only wiser and sharper. And when 10,000 Volts dropped in 2024, critics couldn't believe it. At 73, the Spaceman still sounded like a kid breaking rules in his parents' garage. Even after a studio accident in 2025 forced him to cancel his tour, fans never stopped calling him what he'd always been: the real heartbeat of Kiss. Ace Frehley didn't fade away. He outlasted the machine that once tried to define him. And that's what separates legends from brands: the legacy of the Spaceman's revolt. When Ace Frehley left Kiss, he didn't just walk away from fame, he walked away from a myth. For nearly a decade, Kiss had been sold as invincible: four superheroes who breathed fire, flew through smoke, and never broke character. But when Ace quit, the illusion cracked. The fans saw what was real for the first time: that even gods of rock could bleed. What made Ace's departure so powerful wasn't the drama, but the principle behind it. He wasn't leaving for money, or ego, or headlines. He left because he couldn't keep living inside something that no longer felt true. Kiss had become an empire, and Ace wanted to be an artist. In an industry obsessed with perfection, he dared to be human: messy, unpredictable, but real. And that choice changed everything. His absence forced fans to question what made Kiss special in the first place. Was it the costumes, or was it the chemistry? Was it the spectacle, or the soul? In truth, Ace represented the part of Kiss that couldn't be mass-produced, the imperfections that made it alive. When the band replaced him, they kept the brand, but they lost the danger. And danger is what makes rock and roll immortal. Decades later, even after countless lineup changes, Kiss still can't escape Ace's shadow. Every new guitarist who puts on that silver makeup is compared to him. Every farewell tour feels incomplete without his reckless grin. It's as if the Spaceman became a ghost haunting his own creation. Not bitter, but eternal. And that's the irony of it all. By walking away, Ace Frehley didn't destroy Kiss. He saved its soul. He reminded the world that rock isn't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be alive, unpredictable, and a little dangerous. His decision to quit, to burn out rather than fade into compliance, gave his story the kind of immortality no pyrotechnic show could ever match. Even now, when you hear the opening riff of Shock Me or Cold Gin, you can feel his fingerprints on every note: that unmistakable swagger, that off-the-rails rhythm that only Ace could play. He didn't just write songs, he wrote rebellion into sound. In the end, Ace Frehley's story isn't about quitting. It's about refusing to lose yourself for applause. He showed that sometimes the bravest move in music isn't playing louder. It's walking away quietly, with your guitar in hand and your integrity intact. So the next time you see a band standing in the perfect formation, remember the man behind the silver mask, the spaceman who dared to fall to earth. Because long after the makeup fades, the lights dim, and the fireworks die out, his echo still rings through every honest chord that's ever been played. Ace Frehley didn't just leave Kiss. He reminded the world why rock was worth saving. If you love this deep dive into one of rock's most dramatic moments, hit subscribe and keep your headphones ready. Because here at Backstage Melody, we reveal the legends, lyrics, and secrets that shape the music you love.